Hello, and welcome to the Red Feather Genealogy podcast. This podcast is loosely based on a video that I did months ago, the Cherokee video. It seemed that I hit a little bit of a nerve with that video. I had not really planned on doing that because I was attempting to make instructional videos that were more about what you are than what you are not, and it ended up being more popular than I would have guessed. And then along came Elizabeth Warren, and I had really wanted to do a follow-up video for a few reasons after that because I was suddenly getting a very nice boost in traffic. So this podcast is going to be addressing what's come along in some of the comments that I've gotten on the subject and all of that kind of thing. Alright, now one thing I want to get out of the way that's very important is that I will be referring to Indians as Indians. And there's always going to be that one that's going to call me a racist or whatever, because don't you know, everything is racist these days. Some years ago, I worked with two Indians from Central Oregon. They were cousins. They were very open and frank about everything, volunteering just a lot of stuff about their background, right down to controversial subjects such as calling each other apples because red on the outside, white on the inside. Get it? None of this was a problem. Well, one day I asked them the question that a lot of people probably would, which is, wouldn't you rather be called Native Americans? After all, you're not from India. That whole routine. They responded quite vehemently in the negative, we will say. In the previous podcast, I mentioned that some of this is going to be PG, and this would be one of those moments. When I asked them about this, their response was, "We're Indians, don't call us that native shit." Dead serious. They were quite angry about this, actually. I didn't really understand why, but it really reinforced what I had already noticed, which is that political correctness is actually just about white people trying to feel superior in the name of protecting people who didn't ask to be protected, didn't really need to be protected with a cute moniker of some kind. It turns out that if you talk to the source, sometimes they have a different opinion. So with that being said, Indians are Indians. If an individual wants to be called Native American, great. I often use the term Amerindian just to differentiate North American Indians, which is what I'm usually dealing with genealogy, and actual Indians from India, from the Indian subcontinent. Alright. With that out of the way, Elizabeth Warren. Boy, that was a boost to everything. It's been a long running thing in American history, as detailed in my previous video, that people claim Cherokee backgrounds. And making a video of it put, I'd say a little bit of a spotlight on the subject. The Warren thing put a really big spotlight on it. And it was a spectacular example because her results, which were unusually convoluted to the point of being humorous, were exactly what I had been referring to and the examples that were given in my previous video, which is that, yeah, you might have a little bit of actual Amerindian ancestry, but it goes way back, and or African ancestry, and some people get amazingly upset about that. So her example put up to really an international level due to her tiff with the president that, yeah, you think you're Cherokee and you're not. And I remember how she was really digging in on it. I watched that political ad, the super defensive one about how her heritage was being insulted and denigrated, and they had the whole family glaring at the camera with that hard look like somebody had just threatened their whole family or something. And crap like that, all I ever think is, What do the Cherokees think of this? Do people think so little of the actual Cherokees that nobody bothers to get their actual opinion? Well, they gave their actual opinion after that, which is to disown her, and through her, really, all the Americans, the millions of them that pretend to be Cherokee, because I have never for a second believed that any of these obviously white people, blue eyes and all, would actually have the gall to tell an actual Cherokee that they're cousins. I just don't believe that kind of thing happens. And if it does, I'd really like to be there to watch, because, yeah, that would need a laugh track. Alright, so that having catapulted it into a huge issue and put it in front of people, I would guess that probably boosts a lot of DNA testing. It boosted traffic to my video. It's, I'm not fond of the term, but spreading awareness. As for that video's comment section, wow. This Cherokee thing is like religion and politics, where the more ridiculous it gets, the more irrational it gets, the more people just dig in and cling to the conclusion that they've chosen. I've seen a lot of really great nonsense in the comments. I mean, some are reasonable, but I steer clear of most of it. I finally had to actually ban one guy from the channel because he kept following me around with this nasty garbage. You know, all the usual, DNA is crap. Yeah. Well, hey, you know, if you've already made up your mind about your background, then why'd you take a DNA test? Seriously, why would you waste the time and money if you already got all the answers, right? One major thing that I had wanted to address previously was, and this is to an extent backed up even by some of the big DNA companies, is they say that the testing is inaccurate because the Cherokee tribe specifically has not contributed DNA to the samples. What this means is North American Indians north of what's now Mexico tend to not participate in these projects, but they have a lot of samples from Mexico on down through Latin America. This means that if you actually do have Cherokee or some other North Amerindian DNA, it's more likely to show up as either in general, like they know it's from the New World, or it's drawn closer to, say, the Hopi or the Maya or something farther south than where the Cherokee came from. Yes, it's true that the Cherokee did not specifically test. Yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean that your obviously European DNA results are somehow masking that you've really got Cherokee. In the beginning of this testing, they could differentiate very easily between Africa, Europe, and Asia. And Asia is, of course, a gigantic continent, and it encompasses also the New World, because the New World was essentially populated by Eastern Asians. That doesn't mean that somebody from Oklahoma is getting mixed up with somebody from England, which is exactly what they're trying to say. The people who say that they're mutts from the South or whatever, yeah, they're just British. They're just British. They're less likely to be a mix than really anybody. They're just Brits. So this idea that because that tribe didn't test, well, then obviously my Scottish DNA... Oh God, it's just so preposterous. You know, the funny thing is, in trying to understand this fascination with fake heritage, I read a book that pointed out that the Scots-Irish tend to approximate themselves with the Cherokee because the Scots-Irish have considered themselves to be oppressed, and the Cherokee were obviously oppressed. If you know about the Trail of Tears, we learned about that in school over and over and over. I don't know if they even teach much of it in the rest of the country, but the gist of it is that they were getting along in northern Georgia, southern Tennessee, until they were shunted off of their land and dragged off to Oklahoma, with a lot of them dying in the process. Well, here's the problem with the Scots-Irish identifying with their oppression. They're the ones that oppress them. Oh, it's so many levels of ridiculous. They shove these people off of their land and then, oh, woe is me, I've got a Cherokee grandma. No, you don't. What in the holy hell are you even talking about? You know, it brings to mind a comparison that I know a lot of people are going to think is kind of harsh, but all I can honestly come up with is imagine if Germany had won World War II, and 200 years later, the descendants of those Nazis were going around bragging about their Jewish grandma. You got rid of these people. You're not them. You got rid of them. The Cherokee are fully aware of what you did to them. You. It's just, oh, it's mind-blowing. So, it's just a little bit of an update on things. The Elizabeth Warren thing, perfect example. As far as any of the DNA goes for anybody, the bottom line is you either have Amerindian DNA or you don't. The ancestry tests are not wrong. They're not confused. I've seen a lot of people flip out over results where they'll get less than 1% African and, oh my god, this has to be wrong. It's just some pretty nasty reactions, actually. It also springs to mind, back when I was on the forums, there was a guy, this is all just a funny aside, there was a guy who, his test came back a quarter Jewish, and he spent weeks ranting about, this has to be wrong, this has to be wrong, this is terrible, the Jews are terrible, I'm not Jewish, and eventually I admit that I chimed in with asking him if it was too late to get a refund on his swastika tattoo, because who cares? Who really cares? It's supposed to be interesting. I found out I've got a little bit of Jewish ancestry. Things happen. They're just people. Relax. Relax. You know, I would say, okay, so you're not Cherokee. How about you find out about your actual genealogy? Because it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Just because you don't come from this supposedly mythical tribe that was somehow oppressed by people who were definitely you, but maybe not you, or however you rationalize that, yeah, forget all that. You got an actual ancestry. It's interesting. Look into it. And like I say, if this Warren thing is kind of propelled this whole subject into the spotlight and got more and more people testing, then hey, great. That's a very nice silver lining to it. So the moral of the story is, either you have Amerindian DNA or you don't. Very simple, and there's no getting around it. Well, that's all I got for now, so thank you for listening. Feel free to like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll be back talking to you soon.